So what I want to do as much as I can is kind of tailor the training to who all's here and what they would like to focus on. So have you done work to this point with Validix or with the Ready tool?
I am a very complicated study. We've been zone owners for a long time, but I haven't worked on this until I'm starting to get in it again. But I did take the way back in the day when they had modules. I mean, I've taken modules a long time ago. I mean, this was way back into the old system, and I got through a bunch of them. I forget how many, and then they changed things. And now I've done things, unfortunately, piecemeal. I've actually been on the GIS and done some shape files and stuff according to a video, and then realized I'd gone backwards. So I've been attending a bunch of these, and I'm asking as many questions. I'm getting familiar with the Ready tool, and what I did was I contacted Glenn to try to find out, and I downloaded data from one of my zones. I've got the Ready tool, and then they wanted me to send a license. So I believe I did followed his directions to get the license, and I'm just waiting for it to be sent back to me so I can pop it in and use the Ready tool if I've read that correctly.
Okay. Yeah, and so he'll send you back a file that looks similar to the one you sent to him. It'll have your PC name in it and then say like .license at the end, and then you'll put that in the same folder as you have that rede.exe.
Okay.
And then it'll allow you to open the XML file that you downloaded.
Okay, that's fantastic. So that's what I'm waiting on. I've made a big map of my of the particular zone. I've pieced it together based on GIS data, so I have that all done, and I'm kind of pretty familiar with it anyway. I mean, it's a basic Florida island one where you have condos on the east and developments on the west on the river, and then in the interior you have 50s and 60s housing that is slowly being updated. So it's pretty straightforward on that one. So.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I stress to folks initially is get familiar with the zone if you can before you start dividing it up with the GIS tool. Because if you don't need to, you don't want to slice it into more zones than necessary, because then that just creates more work in terms of the maintenance and stuff going forward.
Right. I do have at some point. I do have some questions on some things like that, like on how to best divide them up to be comparable. For example, this zone is 5 miles long. 1 mile, less than 1 mile wide, depending on how the barrier island works. Now you compare oceanfront to oceanfront, which means sometimes you'll compare properties along a wrong stretch because you don't have enough oceanfront sales with the same. And it's the same way with the river or the canal influence. Sometimes you'll go further than 5 miles away to try to to get a good comparable. It's just around the same age and everything. But you typically wouldn't mix the two. But my question is, I just wanted to make sure that I, made enough market groups and stuff. You probably get that a lot, though, because if you haven't done it, you kind of want to make sure.
Yep.
But it doesn't look like it's going to be that big of a thing. I just want to make sure, rather than go back and redo it. It's just nice to do it kind of in the right direction the first time there. And
yeah, I mean, there's a piece of this certainly for those of us that started early of. You're on the bleeding edge and you make some mistakes. And out here, and I certainly did it as well, I went back after I'd done some work with it and redid a zone, and some of the other zone owners are as well, based on, what we know now and the fact that for the ones that do need to use the GIS tool, they can. The thing is, or at least the key point I stress, and you're an appraiser, right?
I am.
Okay. The key point I stress is look at any, geographic lines in your zone that you really wouldn't cross to find comparables. So, I guess anything you can adjust for, but like you're saying, the ocean view versus not. So you'd probably want to carve out the ocean view ones and say that really is going to be a separate market. But the other ones that you could, you've got these 7 factors in Volytics, like view. So, I mean, if it's feasible to use that view or location, then you wouldn't need to carve out, some areas. And the thing is, if you make 3 market groups with the GIS tool, Volytics is going to carve each of those 3 into maybe 10 or 12 based on size and style. And so then you're going to have 30 or more market groups to start with, and you want to think about each month. You're going to go in and find 3 to 6 new comps for each of these market groups, and so you want to keep that as small as possible so you can manage it.
I have one question as long as I have you here. Unless is there anybody else? Do you need to talk with anybody here?
Well, I see Lee is on from Massachusetts, Rhode Island. Anyway, hi Lee. I'm not sure if you've got audio. It doesn't look like it yet, but Lee was on with us yesterday, and so we can keep. Okay.
I'm on the phone, Matt.
Hi, Lee. So Susan's from Florida, and we were just kind of chatting about her zone.
Hello, Susan.
Hey,
yeah, I'm not from Massachusetts. I'm from Connecticut, so I have waterfront stuff too. Totally understand what you're dealing with.
Yeah, I hear you. Where are you from in Connecticut?
Well, my general area of work operation is in central Connecticut, so that's in the Connecticut River Valley and Farmington River Valley. Are you familiar with Connecticut?
My son was born in New Britain.
New Britain?
New Britain.
No. There's no T in New Britain. You say New Britain.
Yeah, depending. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yeah. No,
anyway, yeah, that's great. That's just around the corner from where I live. I live in Avon.
Okay. Yeah, nice area. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I apologize, Lee. I'm from the Midwest originally, Kansas, and I knew the layout out there, but people I talk to on the East Coast, it's like they're all just kind of blended together. Kansas is up there by Montana, or something like that. So in my mind, you're somewhere on the East Coast, close to the coast. But
yeah, you don't have to apologize. There isn't anything in New England, all 6 of the states, and there's nothing in New England that's not 5 or 6 hours away. You guys out west, you deal with a completely different world versus what we have here. For you, a long drive is 2 days, and you're still in the same state.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
Yeah. And so it's 5 after, actually 7 after now. It may be just the 3 of us, which is okay today, and then, Susan, that'll give us a little more opportunity to kind of focus on where you're at, and do some work with the Ready tool so you can see how that works, and look at the zones with the GIS tool, and hopefully get you kind of familiar as you get the tool licensed. And Lee, Susan had sent in the license key file but hasn't used the Ready tool yet. And were you saying that you had used it, Lee? You're testing the new one, yes. I know, and so you've kind of used it in a production scheme.
I have. The issue I have is that my data is not very well mapped. So I'm waiting, actually, probably don't need to wait, but currently I'm waiting for more input from Robert Cass. Apparently he has used MLS to import a ton of properties and import that data and map it that way. I know he's been busy in the last week or two, so I really haven't been bothering him. I've been experimenting more with the Ready tool with the data that I have and seeing what it does. As you know, I'm certain it's a very robust tool. But I don't want to get in the way of what you're training Susan on, particularly if it's a more beginner type thing. I'm basically taking this week. I sat through all the different sessions that you guys have had. I'm very, very impressed.
Yeah, thank you.
The level of the training, and my objective this week was to kind of get an overview of what I need to do here in Connecticut. I don't have an ADO that's active. Frank O'Neill is one, and Linda Sepso is another. I know Frank is somewhat aware of the status of the 2580 load that went on here, but he hasn't really been working the zones. He's been really, really busy with the other stuff going on. Linda Sepso is not at all engaged. She hasn't done anything. She's kind of waiting for me. She knows, she's aware of what I'm doing. She's kind of waiting for me to create the protocol, if you will. And so that's my objective. My objective is to create the protocol for the entire state of Connecticut. I'm going to act like I'm the ADO and just get this thing done. I'm going to do at least 3 counties here in the state. There's 93 zones, I think, that comprise the entire state of Connecticut. I'm probably going to do a third of them myself, even though I don't own them. The objective is to get them modified live. Linda is going to handle New Haven County. I think that's like 20-odd zones. And then there's another gal who actually is Frank's daughter, Jennifer O'Neill. She owns 10 zones in Fairfield County, and I think 1 or 2, maybe a total of 10, 8 in Fairfield County, 1 in Litchfield County. Now, you have no clue where those counties are. You don't really need to know, but Fairfield County is a fairly densely populated county, as is New Haven County. The 3 counties that I'm going to take care of are also the densely populated counties, Hartford, Holland, and Middlesex. Mm-hmm. The 2 ears on Connecticut, the northwest corner and the northeast corner, are the least populated chunk of our landscape. And so while they do represent a fairly large land area, they do not represent any kind of population density whatsoever. So we're leaving those for last. And the only real county that's sort of up for grabs at this point is New London County. That one is relatively densely populated. It is a coastal county. Mystic and New London, Niantic. Well, you guys don't know where that is. But anyway, those are areas where rivers penetrate the landscape, so there's a lot of waterfront stuff. It was populated relatively early in our history, and so there's a lot of old stuff there, some of which has been rebuilt into fairly expensive, probably the most expensive outside of Fairfield County. And so that one is sort of up in the air as to who's going to get to it first. I have my eyes on it, but I've got my hands full with the other 3. So my objective here is to kind of gather all the information I can from you guys, and then kind of winnow it down to what works for us. And there you have it.
Yeah.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that overlaps pretty well with where Susan's at and what would be good for you to know. Let me ask you, Susan, do you have a feel yet for the data that's in Validix, this 2580 data they call it, in terms of how complete it is for your area, your zones?
Since I haven't been able to open the file, I haven't looked to see. I think I understand. Peter said that, I believe if I got it correct, that the 2580 hadn't got here yet, but I'm not sure. I haven't opened it, like I said, until I get the license. And
okay.
He said something about 2 to 3 weeks it's out. So
yeah.
And of course Glenn said in that case leave type or whatever until something, until
right.
he gets updated on some of those. But some of the other the changing, I'm like Lee. I've kind of tried to sit in as many classes as I could this week, and you pick up each time something becomes clearer. And I started out a little backwards. I started out listening to the thing first on the GIS, so I'm getting on Explorer, and I'm doing these maps
right.
and drawing things, and so I was a little premature. I think maybe I have to do something else first, because I just want to make sure I'm getting everything in the proper order. But I do want to compliment you. I think the training has been excellent from all you guys. It's just been really good. So
yeah.
doing that.
Thanks. Well, we'll see in the 25. I mean, with the Ready tool, how it can highlight the data that's there or not there. The other thing I think I'd stress to both you guys is, even if the data's not there yet, I encourage you to go through one zone and work it as far as you can, even if you end up redoing it, because then you're going to learn how all this works and the tools and things. And I sat in yesterday on Chaz's as well. I don't know if you did on his. He had this flow chart you can see there, And his point is good here that, he's saying we can get in an order, and if it's a new untouched zone, you really could get it ready in 24 hours. But the big thing that depends on is knowing how to use the tools and also being familiar with your zones, knowing how the market groups are going to work, so you can go in and figure out the market or the market group for your subject, even if you don't do the rest of the zone. So I think that even absent the 2580 update, working with the tools and trying to take a zone as far as you can is a good thing. And then, if the orders start coming in before all the zones are done, you'll be able to jump on them and cherry pick. And I agree with Chaz as well that, it kind of takes care of itself then going forward. You don't have your whole market or all the zones ready, but you get an order and you do it, and that takes care of one market group, and then you do another one, and that takes care of another market group, and you get an order for one you've already done last week, and then it's really fast, and you just go down here, you've got it modified live, and click the deliver report. Excuse me. And I think the other thing I'd say, with Chaz's flowchart, which is very good in terms of the details and stuff, it isn't strictly sequential here. I mean, you could define your markets first with the GIS tool before you use the Ready tool. You could complete the details page for the markets as well before you balance. So these things, you can kind of work on as you're ready to, as long as you get it down to the bottom of getting it to modified live. And then the other thing I think I'd say, before we jump in, is in terms of this data and what's it mean with the 2580. And you may have heard this, but just to give you my take on it, back in the 2006-2007 time frame, 2580, which is kind of everything, was loaded into all the zones. And then since then, it hasn't been, although what they call the 1080 was being loaded for a while. And the 1080 had new sales information, and so some of that in terms of the sales prices and dates is in there. Within this revived ZAO and ZDS, they didn't load all the 1080, the sales information. They instead went back to these 2580 data files that would have new sales, new properties that had been built recently, or updates in the parcel numbers, and that's the kind of thing they're pushing in now, as well as fixing and some of the mapping. And what that means is, this 2580 or the FAIRS data, First American Real Estate Services, will have, in theory, everything that you're seeing from your assessor, from the public records, from the other data sources you've got. The question is, because this varies from county to county or state to state, did they map it into the right Validix fields? So this thing about style and type, in theory, some assessors or some counties have information that they could fill that in. You'll see out here in California, we have some, but not all, and so I can demonstrate how we manually figure this out. And so the idea is, for this rough scoring, we're going to use what we can from the public records data to figure out how to score these properties. And that's, a change from that old paradigm of you're going to walk the markets and look at each house and manually say, here's the style and type, and do all of that kind of one by one. So this is a way to do it roughly and get that in so we can quickly produce orders. And that's why I titled today's session, getting your zone ready to make money. And
I'm laughing because I was one of the photographers back in the day.
All right. Well, I always thought it would be nice to do. I just never was able to break out the time and do it, to walk the zone.
Funniest story, just real quick, not to bother you. The funniest story was we had my husband sometimes would follow up in a car in certain places. I had one homeowner come out and come running toward me. I thought he was going to attack me, and instead he was hoping I was from the FBI and we get the grow house that was going next door.
Jeez.
He was really disappointed. I wasn't.
Yeah, yeah, and out here, guys are saying, well, the tack they took was putting on these big orange vests and saying they're doing a, public safety survey or something, rather
Oh,
than,
cool.
having
Yeah,
people come out
that's good.
and confront them, because at least that was one of the initial markets they were saying, you can use these photographs for the fire department, all that. Again, that was kind of before
Right.
the Google Street View and that kind of thing.
Right.
So
right.
Susan, let me ask you, and I think Lee has seen this demonstration of the one-off order tool in Volytics. Have you seen that demonstrated yet?
No, I have not.
Okay. I thought I would start with that and kind of work backwards, because really today I could generate a ZVal for my zones and sell it and make money. So it really is there in terms of being ready and the tools being there. And so I thought, let's start with that and then kind of work backwards into Volytics and the Ready tool. And so when you log into Volytics, you've probably seen now there's a new home screen that's this map tab, and that shows you your zones. And you see the blue money bags, and if you had watched the Brad Stinson presentation, you see how that works now. They're mapping these orders and saying, okay, whether you put it in as a one-off order, or we get 1,000 properties across the country that we pump in automatically, you'll be able to look at your zone and see these money bags, click on it, and produce the order. The thing I like now, locally, so next to the map button, there's this orders button. And I've put in a couple of test orders here, but if I got one today, I could go up here and click this place an order button, and that'll bring up this screen where it's got an address search. And I just looked up one this morning for one of my zones, 465 Matthews. I like that name. Court, Milpitas. And so then I'll search on that. If you don't quite get it right, it'll give you some matches, or if it matches perfectly, it'll take you to that second screen, place an order. I'll click on this one and say this is the one I want. And so now this is all you have to do to place an order. Fill in the information, and in particular, the fields with stars are the ones that are mandatory, that have to be filled out. And this is a lot easier than what it was a month ago. Although we're still working with this eTrack company, there's been some problems with their abilities technically to connect our servers and make the tools. But there is a whole rigmarole to set up a customer, a test customer, and then push the order over and get it back from Volytics. And now it's all just on this one screen. And so I can say, okay, what I'm going to do is the ZVal, which is the one they've got working now. Don't have to fill in any of this. Just put in a client name and address. And a reference number.
Matt, do you
So
check the chat log as you go along?
I do, and I've got it over here. So yeah. And let's see.
I typically mute myself, and I don't want to interrupt the flow of information.
Yeah,
so I just go in the chat.
Sure. Where we're a small group, Lee, I'd say just go ahead and interrupt. There's no problem with that.
Oh, not going to bother me, Lee. In fact, I would probably welcome the questions in, please. Anything I can learn is fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that.
Yep.
I'll leave you on so you can hear all the noises I make.
Yeah. Hey, I've got control. If the dog's barking in the background, I can mute you.
Yeah, I don't mind the dog barking. That I can handle it. Those other personal noises,
Yeah. Yep. And so, yeah, the most recent question about whether it's case sensitive, it doesn't seem to be. It's not as robust as I'd like. I was playing with this one, and for example, I just put one T in Matthews, and it didn't figure that out. But if I left off the court, it would bring it up. So there's some intelligence or fuzzy logic where it tries to guess if you don't put it in quite right. But I don't know for sure. I mean, houses on my street for some reason won't come up at all, and it's kind of a funny naming scheme, and so for whatever reason the tool's not working on that. So I'm certain there'll be more kind of bugs or limitations found, but for the majority of the properties we've seen, it's working and working pretty smoothly. So it found this property, and I put in the required information and hit submit order here, and now it says it creates order 57, and there it is. So this is a new one. So it's got a little drop down here, so I can look at the detail for the property, look at the score or the market to see if I balanced it. And all this is going to be helpful when we're initially doing these. But as I've also said, with each month or each iteration of processing more orders or finding things that you need to fine tune in your zone, it's going to get more and more accurate, and you're going to have to do less and less in terms of this kind of tuning up of the zones and stuff. So if I'm happy, I click on it, and it brings me to this next screen, which is actually going to produce the ZVal, the document in PDF format that we're going to deliver to the customer. And it'll have fields that I can fill in, put in comments and that kind of thing, and then sign it at the bottom and create the order. So here you can see it now, and it goes through. It puts the borrower name that I put in. It pulls all the other information that we've already got in Valytics, the owner, parcel number, that kind of thing. I've put in this neighborhood information into Valytics, and this is the same kind of stuff you see on the typical form reports, and so you'll set that up and it'll auto-populate this location, built up, all these fields.
Is that market group specific then?
It is. So it's market group specific. So each market's going to be sliced into 10 or so market groups. You can combine them back together, and then once you've got your primary market group set up, you'll go in and put this in. The tool in Valytics is pretty nice because a lot of this is going to be the same for, say, all 30 market groups in your zone, and you can copy those fields over in mass. And so there'll be maybe just the neighborhood description and a few other things that you'll need to fine-tune for each market group. And even here, if you go in and say, that's not quite right here, it really is 40 years old as the minimum, you can change it right here on the form. You'd want to go back and change it in Valytics eventually, so it's right from then on, and that's this thing I'm talking about, just kind of fine-tuning it. But if you're trying to get this out in an hour, you don't have to go back, change it in Valytics, and recreate this report. You can just type it in here. It's got the prior sales information. It picks the comps and does these calculations, on the sales prices before and after adjustment and where the value estimate is. And I can see here's the Valytics predicted price and today's date. Can put in the intended use, and then on the second page, put in some more custom comments here if I want, and click the sign and submit. I don't have my signature set up yet, or this license information, but once it's there, then essentially that's it. I can create a PDF and send it off, and at this point invoice the customer directly. I'm sure that there's work behind the scenes to tie into the invoicing piece and that kind of thing, but for me this just gives me confidence that we're essentially at the finish line now in terms of being able to make money from this thing. And as you may know, there's this guy Michael Hartman up in Seattle that was selling these 3 or 4 years ago before things collapsed, and even now I think the CASs up in your area may have sold some, or at least are certainly demonstrating it actively. And for us out here, being able to go into a client now and take an address and create a report for them real time is really the last piece we needed, I think, to be able to sell the thing. And so I'm happy about that. So I wanted to show that initially. And
the ZVal doesn't have a picture, right?
The ZVal doesn't, and I think that for at least one of the customers we were talking about the kind of exterior inspection and or even working with these property inspectors to get the pictures if they're not there. But for this product, this ZVal, it's just this 2-pager or maybe a third page if we put the appraiser license and just this limited information we're giving them.
Do you have the ability on this form, like to add a map if somebody would want, or a picture, overhead picture from from a big map or something? Do you have that ability to import in?
Right. Today it doesn't. I don't believe, but I know that's that there's this tool where we're putting in enhancements, and so that was one of them in particular, being able to add additional forms and stuff.
Okay. I've got a question on your... Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I think this is designed as a desktop thing. I don't think you want to add too much more information because you're not getting paid much for this.
Yeah, that's true. I was curious. I was just more of a general question. Some places they want you to put license in or something like that, and if you needed to add a PDF, or sometimes we have a privacy policy that we add just as a protection for us to kind of. So I was wondering if you had the ability to clip on a PDF of your choosing. Sometimes I have extra language I put in, but like you said, it may be the kind of thing where you just don't want to do that, or it's not needed, or whatever. So it's just curious.
Yeah. But
Matt, how are you selling this?
What's that?
How are you selling this?
Well, what we've done locally, I mean, we have, speaking of myself and like the 6 or 7 other appraisers that are in ZDS out here, it's been primarily realtor contacts, and so that's who we've been talking to. And the on the credit union front, there were a couple of credit unions that we had relationships with before, and we may be able to break back in, but they, like the other lenders, had pretty much gone to the AMC model of where they're working through some AMCs to get their valuation right now. So for us locally, I think it's going to be the local lenders and the realtors that we're going to try to break back into the lenders and do the one-off work for the realtors.
Isn't this kind of like comparable to like a BPO type thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Market, kind of.
Yeah, and
because I know with a lot of lenders. I remember attending the conference out in Las Vegas a couple years ago, or I forget when it was, last year, whenever, and they had one of the guys from one of the big banks, and they were saying, listen, frankly, you guys can't do enough. For REOs, we had to go to BPOs instead of appraisals because there just wasn't enough appraisers to do all the work. And
right.
So that's why I was thinking that this was kind of developed to maybe tap into that market that appraisers aren't even getting right now.
Yeah, and I wanted to go back, but I guess I can't now that I put it in. But the drop down when you put in a new property, it's got like 5 different products there: the ZVal and Zevo and a couple others. So and Brad Stinson on his slides, we saw his presentation yesterday. He's kind of got these things queued up, saying, we will have products that compete at all these price points. Down here is the AVM at $30 and a full-blown interior inspection at $450, and 4 or 5 steps in between this desktop like the ZVal and an exterior drive-by. And so we'll be able to do comparable products to each of those that add more features, like Lee was saying, like the pictures or the map that we can sell and sell at each of those price points to hopefully compete and maximize the revenue we get out of this.
Okay. I also have another question, if it's okay.
Yeah.
The sales history section down there on your thing,
right.
That's importing data from MLS or from your public tax assessor records, or both, or how do they work that? Because I think the MLS imports it from the tax records, but do they do it from one, both? How is that brought in?
I'm going to have to check this because this is only the second day I've looked at it, and I saw assessor, and I'm presuming, although it says assessor/MLS, that it was assessor. I mean, that's typically how I'll do it on on a report is, lead with the assessor, but put
Me
in the
too,
actual
yeah.
document number. Um,
Yeah, that's what I do too, yeah.
and
Because I'm finding that it's just a tad more reliable than the, in some things. And then, it's hard to say because that's another question. Some things I find the MLS is a little more reliable in, and then sometimes I find and then sometimes neither one of them are. How do you guys handle that?
right.
Just going around and correcting, probably. When you find it's probably what.
Yeah, and on a regular report, I will tend to trust the assessor's information on the recording date because in the MLS, the agent may put it in assuming it's going to close Friday, and it doesn't until Monday. And on the price, if it's a normal sale, again, I'll tend to believe the assessor if there's a difference, and I'll comment on it because then sometimes there may be some hidden concessions that the agent didn't disclose if there's a discrepancy. So
Are these forms designed to show the discrepancy if there is kind of like data masters, like where there's a discrepancy between MLS and public records? And I'll give you an example to highlight what I'm talking about. I discovered when I was doing research here that the MLS gives the closing date as the day the closing occurred, and we found out that the tax records gives the last date of the last known notarized signature, which is different, and they do that for tax purposes.
Right.
It occurs a little earlier, and they get the tax revenue, which is what they want. And so I kept finding all these discrepancies, and I called and finally got some person up higher up to tell me that that's the way they did it. So if there's a discrepancy, I tend on that particular date, I will go with the MLS, particularly after calling the realtor. Does it highlight when there's a discrepancy, or are we just getting data from a certain point? I guess is what is what I'm asking.
It doesn't highlight the discrepancy. When we're in Validix, we'll be able to see both the MLS data if we loaded it and the assessor's information if it's come in from the 1080 run.
Okay.
Here, I think that rather than say assessor/MLS, it should say whichever one it is, because it does know, which one it pulls from, because both of them are available potentially in Validix. So that's some fine tuning that needs to be done, and that again, my opinion on something like this is we put that in the scope of work that we're relying on. MLS data if it's available, or if not, we report the assessor's data.
Okay.
Again, for a $65 product or whatever, there's going to be a more limited scope of work, and we're going to make more assumptions like that. So I think as long as we document what we do and don't do, it'll be okay there. But that's certainly a good point, and one I'll highlight as well on the form.
Yeah, just curious as to where it came from and how it flows. It helps me to see. So basically, you're going to have you're saying you're having access to both data. You'll be able to see where they came from, even if it doesn't highlight the discrepancy. At least you're able to see where the data came from.
Right.
Right. Okay. Great.
And have you gotten into trying to load your MLS data into your zones yet, Susan or Lee?
No, I haven't. Have you, Lee?
I have MLS Exchange, and nobody out west uses that particular MLS data field, data source. You guys use Paragon and a bunch of other ones that I've never heard of.
Yeah.
So I have attempted to do it. I haven't actually done it. The Casses know how to do it, and I'm waiting for Robert. That was one of the things I was waiting on. Robert's going to kind of walk me through it. They have some of their zones are using ML Exchange, so they already know how to do that, and in fact have used MLS data pretty much to populate their stuff before the 2580 was run. That's why they're so far along.
Yeah, and there's good data in there, and that was certainly one of the things I was thinking that we'd do is I could just give you a quick demonstration. I know, Lee, you were on with Carol Joe Brackney last night, just to show you how it looks and how it works. We can come back to this, and I've got a little document, but I thought, Carol talked a bit about the MLS specific work yesterday, and like you say, Lee, that's going to, there's the step one that's going to vary based on each appraiser's local MLS. And, what that step one is going to entail is go into your MLS and export data. And if you've been doing this to make charts and things already, it may not be too unfamiliar, but if you haven't, you'll need to go in and figure out, how can I search for some properties. For example, I use zip code because out here the zones match pretty well to zip code, so I can put in all the zip codes for my zones and say I want to see all the closed sales for single families and condos, and then each time I go in, I'll just change the date. There's a date of change for each record in the MLS. And so what I'll do is have this search set up, go into my MLS, and export the data. And you export it like you would for an Excel file if you're going to make a graph. In this case, you export it in a certain format that's called CSV, comma separated values. But once you've got that done in your MLS, then you just run it each month. What Carol didn't show, and I'll show you here, is how to see all the fields that Volytics needs. And so I just defined one because there was this work they're already doing on the MLS import. I'm going to click Edit here, and this screen that it shows you now is how you'll do a one-time mapping. You'll say this is the data I've got from the MLS in this column, and over here is over here is the Volytics data field, and on the right is a sample of the data. But the key thing I wanted to show you is these little drop downs. All these have the same fields, and so this is the thing that you're going to need to go into your MLS and export. You'll want to export the parcel number, the transaction date, price.
Transaction date's got to be the close date in this case, right?
Well, let me go back to that point that you were talking about. Some locations may have 3 or more dates associated with a transaction, right? You may have a sign date, a recording date, a closing date. So you're going to you want to be consistent and pick the date that's most appropriate for your market and map that across. Out here, we use the close of escrow date versus the contract date, and same with price. MLS may have a list price as well as the final sales price, and so you want to make sure you've got that final sales price. As I'll show you, I mean, the only things that I see that we really need right now in Volytics is this date and price, because Volytics use that to predict the values, and the reference number, which is the MLS number, because when I'm scoring or balancing my zone each month, I'm going to pull up the MLS details for that property, for that sale, on one screen and look at it and say, okay, I've got the view adjustment right and the condition adjustment right, or I need to tweak it. And so I use that reference number then to go back in to the MLS. We don't get a real accurate report of concession amounts, and I'm not positive if Volytics actually does a calculation on that or not. It might. This owner and days on market is there, I guess, for us to reference, and there's actually 2 different ways that Volytics can map up or match up what you put out of your MLS with what it's got in its data, either the full street address, if that's how it spits out, or separately a street number and street name. But anyway, these are the and unit number if it's a condo. These are the fields here that we want to put into Volytics. If you happen to have some other fields that come or that you want to spit out of your MLS, it's okay if they're in the file. Like down here, this list price, well, like I said, Volytics doesn't use it. So on that one, I can just map that to ignore field, and I could have 10 ignore fields if I wanted, if I was getting them out. But everything else here I've got matched up on our MLS, and here's the sample data from the first row, and I can say, okay, yeah, this is making sense. It's
I've got a
Yeah.
one question here. Where you have days on market, there is one. You're importing just sales, right?
Just
You're
sales.
not importing, okay.
Again, out here, there's our MLS has both a days on market and a continuous days on market. If the agent pulls it off and relists it with a different number, they keep track of that. So again, you can map whatever you want out of your MLS that you'll use in Validix. And days on market, I really don't know why we even pull that into Validix, at least in my workflow, because I'm going to be looking at that and everything else when I use this reference number and go back into the MLS. But anyway, they've got it here. So let me go back to sales import. The very first time you create...
Before you leave Matt, before you leave that, just snap back into that, can you?
Sure. Let's just edit this.
Okay, the MLS data field, all that information that you have listed there, that's information you typed in, right? Because it's blank otherwise.
I'll show you how that works. That's actually row 1 in the file, and that's what my local MLS calls the APN. They say parcel number. Right,
but you got that name from someplace else and typed it there yourself, right?
I didn't type it, but I can show you now exactly how it gets put in there.
Okay, that's great.
Yep.
It's what your local MLS calls that field that you've matched up, right?
Right. So let's say this is day 1, and I've just created an MLS export, and I'm going to say, see this blue thing here, new import profile. I'm going to click that, and now I can call this anything I want. I'll call this my test profile and describe it. Again, in your MLS, you'll probably have an option to include the field names on the first row or not. You'll want to do that. You'll want to say on your MLS, export it with field names, and then you'll want to tell Validix here that the first field is going to have the names of everything that's underneath it, but not the actual data. And so now I'm creating this new profile, and I'm just going to do this one time, and then it'll work, month after month or week after week. I'm going to say choose file here, and let's see. Here's one that I exported from my MLS. I called it Zayo Data, and it's the CSV file. And I'm going to click it. It's got 18,000 records, which is probably about 200 properties. Now, when I click Load File, it brings up this screen. So it read that first row of data in my MLS export and said, okay, the first one's called parcel number, and here's an example of the data, what it looks like. The second one's called close of escrow date, and here's a sample of what it looks like. Now, all I have to do... Go ahead.
It took the field names. It took the field names that you chose.
Yes, exactly. The stuff that I made spit out of my MLS.
Yep, okay, got it.
Okay, so then, over here, each of these it's set to ignore field. I drop down and I say, okay, first one's parcel number. I exported it in the sequence that it's asking for here. That's the thing Validix calls transaction date, and I just go on down the row like this. And then I've got all this mapped, and then I can hit save. Okay, once it's done. Oops, well, it's not going to let me. I'm going to cancel this, but you see how that works. And then it would have test here.
Yep.
So now I've got this, and then each month or week, whenever I run the data, I'll just go ahead and say use this profile and leave this field checked. First row's field names. I'll choose my file. This is the one I did today. And then I'll say load file. And it will show me, just like Lee, we saw with Carol last night, if there's any of those 200 records that it cannot match up with parcel number and address or whatever else it uses to try to match up, it'll give me a list of those. And typically...
gives you an exception report.
Yeah. Out here, what I see, I because the data is pretty good in terms of the addresses and stuff, what I see are brand new properties. So these may be ones that were just built that the 2580 data that they loaded didn't scoop up.
Doesn't see yet.
Right. And I'm fine with, letting those go because, again, just kind of getting up on my soapbox, if I've got 99 out of 102 properties in the zone, I'm, about as good as I'm going to get. There's going to be exceptions and things we don't catch. And as long as it's a small number, I tend not to worry about it. And in fact, here you can see out of those 200, here's one that sold for $1.8 million, Thrash House Investors LLC. It's pretty obvious that was a brand new home that was built, a spec home. This other one I'm not so sure about, but again, I'll say I'm not going to worry. That's 2 out of 200, so I got a 99% match. If I wanted to try to or see if it's in there, I could click this match button here, and Volytics will say, any of these look right. Now, why it's putting up Abbey Wood instead of Templeton, I don't know. So like I said, out here at least, there hasn't been problems with the address match, so all of these for me have been new construction. And so I'll just say skip all, and now here it's going to give me the import results. Import successful, duplicate record. What that means is I actually had run this and I overlapped like one day, and so some of these, I guess, for March 13th were ones that I had already loaded in here into Volytics. But all the rest, it's going to say import successful. This record skipped by user, that's the one we just looked at. That's some kind of brand new development that's not in Volytics. But you can see how this works, and then there's the results for all 200 of those. So those are now in Volytics and ready to use when we balance the markets each month. So once you've got this set up, it's quick.
Okay, let me ask you this question. I've
Yep.
just, supposing I've got my license and supposing I'm rough scoring my data and I'm looking at my data in the Ready tool and it looks pretty good. Let's say that I don't have to really, it's pretty complete.
Yep.
When I say good. It looks complete and it's got, the square footage, because a lot of our assessor has quite a few fields that match, although bedroom, bathroom count may not be there.
Right.
I'm not sure how that is, but supposing for the most part it looks pretty good. What I'm doing at that point is I'm just starting to bring in new sales, or am I going back and recapturing, like, say, the bedroom, bath count? What am I doing with the MLS data? Is that just bringing in every week, every 2 weeks, the new sales that have occurred?
Sure. That's what it's doing. It's bringing in the new sales, and let me show you what it's good for. So, again, kind of working backwards, we saw how we produced a report. Before we can produce a report, we've got to make sure that the market is balanced. So, let me see. Let's do this one. I think that's one I've been training on. I'll say, on this field markets, this tab, I'm going to search here. And so this is my market balancing screen. I've got 34 markets, and
have you rough scored these?
These have been rough scored and combined, and you can see, like here, the C on this line. That means comps were last updated on March 9th. There's 1,086 properties that are modified live out of 1,086. I didn't have any exceptions there. And so what I'm going to do then each month for the ones that have enough properties, and I'll stress this point as you're putting your markets together, creating the market groups and combining them, you're going to need roughly 200 properties as a minimum in a market group for it to work. And by work, I mean that there will be enough sales that you can have 3 to 6 sales in the last 6 to 12 months that Volytics will use to predict the values for all the other properties. And so let me go in here to one of these. Let's take the one right above it. Independence High School is the name of my market, and then Volytics sliced it by size range, so 1,300 to 1,599, one-story single-family detached is a market group.
Are those preset splits, or are those splits that you determine based on your market?
They are preset, the size ranges.
Okay.
And
Okay.
again, I just kind of getting up on my soapbox again. One of the things that can concern people going into this initially is, well, what am I going to do about that property that's 1301 and really the best comp is down there at 1298 and it's in a different market group and Validix isn't picking it. It doesn't matter if you've got some other properties that are between 1300 and 1599 that still allow Validix to predict the price. So in this scheme, you don't have to have the best comps as long as you've got your adjustment factor set right. You've just got to have enough comps so that Validix can do its thing, and it's going to bracket it based on the best it can and predict the prices. So there's probably some sophisticated ways the software could go in and not have those hard size ranges and do a better job picking. But what I've seen is that it works. Yep.
Can I ask a question just before I forget
Sure.
it? Sorry about that, because this is something. There's we operate in 2 different MLSs, and hopefully what I'm trying to do is do the ones on the Innovia. But I also have an ML Exchange, and which is a pain, and I don't think it's because it's ML Exchange as much as it's because the group that runs it are very lawsuit conscious. So instead of giving the square footage, they will always give a range. So you can only draw in a range, and their ranges are a little oddball. They might not match this range. They also don't give active days on market because they're afraid of realtors coming in and stealing listings. So you have to go in and kind of compute it yourself, which is kind of a pain because it's just more extra step you have to do.
Sure.
So if you're importing data that's not giving you the square footage from the MLS, have you encountered that with anybody? Any other? That would be difficult to import because you can't really break it up.
But here's what I'll say: not a problem, because the way Validix works is it will have the assessor's data, so not a problem if your assessor reports the actual square footage. And again, recognize those may not be right or perfect, but it has a square footage that Validix is going to use. And then what Validix does when you load the MLS data, it really just wants the price and the date that the sale occurred, and that's what it's going to use for its magic to predict the values. Now, like Lee said, if your MLS actually has better data than your assessor, the Ready tool has some capabilities that will allow you to go in and match it up and say, I'm going to overwrite what's in the assessor's data right now with what's in the MLS because I know it's correct. So you can get around those limitations, but for what we're talking about here with the MLS, as long as you can get a property address and a price and a date, that's going to be the key thing for Validix.
Okay.
So let me click on this zone and I'll show you how that's going to look. So when I clicked on that zone, this brought up what's called the balance screen, if you've seen this before. On the green line here is that market group that I just clicked on, Independence High School 1300 to 1599. And here, because I've balanced it before, you see some property records that are with a blue background and with the gold star turned on. That means I've looked at these and I'm using them as my comps. I'm using them to predict values. And this date here, December 28th, and the sales price came from, you see provider here, MLS. If there was a sale that was in Fairs, it's not in the MLS, the provider would say Fairs. The way Validix is set up is it gives priority. If there was an MLS sale, it's going to put it in. And here it's going to tell me that reference number, the MLS listing number, so I can go back and look at it and get some more detail. So when Validix does its thing after I have 3 or more comps, it gives you this predicted value here. It says the way you've got me set up right now, I'm predicting $443,000. The actual sales price was 410, so this is a little bit off. And over here, this one is 439, but the actual price was 471. So I probably, and I had done this fairly quickly, I probably need to go back in and look and decide, is this condition rating really a 6 average, or was some more work done when it was sold, and make this adjustment. We're going to start with the ready tool and put 5s in for all this stuff and do a little bit of fine tuning there. But once those values are in for these 7 factors, view, location, site size, and you put in this number, this opinion of influence, then Volytics can do its thing. So that's the other thing. As you're initially going into your zone, you want to think about, the way I'm going to score view, I want each point of difference between a 5 and a 6, say, to be worth $10,000. In that case, I'll make this number 100,000. And once you first go in and start doing this balancing, if the numbers aren't right, if the red numbers aren't matching the actual prices, and you've got some differences in that field, then you may want to tweak this and say maybe it really is only 50,000. And so you'll go through that for all of these, and Volytics will use those when it computes the prices. The 2 key ones up here on the top, as well as this floor area. This is the GLA adjustment that you're going to do, that probably is going to be similar to what you're doing now on current appraisals, typical appraisals, although some guys tend to be more conservative and may have this lower than it really is, and you'll see that based on the work you do kind of tuning it up. But for me, $80 looked like it was about right for this size range house. Now when I go up to the 2,500 plus market group, I may make that $100 or $120. And in the same way for the time, for the market conditions adjustment, it's been relatively flat the past year in this market, so I've got that at a 0. But if it's in a declining or a improving market, you can make that a positive or negative, effective annual percentage change. And Volytics will use that as well based on the dates. So let me go back and talk about those MLS sales we just loaded up. The way these things are sequenced here is by date, December 28th, December 23rd, December 22nd, but with all the blue current comps selected first. And so I'm going to go over here. I've got 6 currently, and you can see how this changed. Now, this blue one from December 15th was my last comp that I had set previously, and now here's all the new sales. Here's a March 6th sale and a March 1st sale. So those would have been in my most recent MLS download and put into the zone. I'm going to click on this just to show you when we look at this property detail that we can see both what the MLS and what the assessor's information was. So I'll click on this one, and let's see, I think it's this sales and listing. So this is showing the property details for the house. If there was a case where there'd been some remodeling and it shows it in the MLS, and I check the assessors have it, but it's not in Volytics, I could actually change that here. And in some areas we're seeing that quite a bit out here. A lot of the properties that sell have been expanded or are tear downs, and if we don't have it, the new information, we can put it in here. But let me go to this sales listing tab, and so here you can see sales history. July of 06 and January of 03 there were sales, and that's from fairs, and there's the document number. And then down here in this section is the MLS sale I just loaded, the $399,000. So that's the one that's being used for that property. That's given priority over these other ones. And what this tells me is, well, this is a fairly recent one, but I think the 1080 data hasn't been run for about a year for this zone out here. So really, to get Volytics to work, we've got to rely on the MLS data that we can load right now. So now let me go back here. I I'm under the properties additional data for this one, and just go back to the zone and show you how we're going to finish it up. Now I'm going to demonstrate something else for you here that is kind of a glitch, but you don't want to panic with Google Chrome. All of a sudden, all these white fields have crazy numbers. Location adjustment, 438,000. See all this stuff here. This is because there's something with Chrome and it not going back and refreshing the information. So I'm just going to click this refresh. It'll go back to the server and pull up the right information. So if you ever see all those crazy numbers in there, it's because you hit the back button and the screen didn't refresh right. I'm going to scroll back over here and finish what I was talking about just in terms of what you'll do each month to balance the zone. So I'll say, this looks like a pretty good one. I want to use maybe these 2, and maybe I know about this one, these 3 comps. And so what I've got to do, because right now we're limited to 6 comps, is turn off these 3 oldest ones and turn on the 3 newer ones. So I'm going to do that by clicking on this yellow star. Again, because this has to go back and talk to the Validic server and then come back, it takes a few seconds, and so don't get impatient, keep clicking, because I think it remembers, and I've done it where I click twice and it'll turn it off and then turn it back on. So I'm just going to wait a second, and as soon as that one turns off, I'll click this one.
Matt, do you empty your Chrome cache on a regular basis?
Yeah, and I know that's one thing that you've seen, and they've talked about that too. Sometimes if you're running a report, the cache with all this data gets confused, and so this little wrench up here you can click on and say settings here, and it'll open up a new tab for us, and under the hood, clear browsing data, and I'll click that, and I've got this set to clear empty the cache, the thing Lee was talking about. So you can do that also as kind of a troubleshooting step.
They told me to do the first 4.
Oh, I'm going to say it doesn't matter. It's the cache that's really the key piece that can mess up the browser. This other stuff with browsing history, I like to keep that because now if I type VAL, it'll automatically pull up Validics. It knows I've been there before. The cookies,
right. And cookies.
Yeah, I mean, like banking sites, I like to keep the cookie there because then it doesn't keep prompting me for my mom's maiden name every time, when I go back in. So,
right. No, I understand that. I'm just telling you what Glenn was insistent on. He said you got to make sure all 4 of those are done. So I'm just wondering if maybe that's some of the issue that you're having with the odd data population.
Let me think about that. I believe based on...
I've not heard that situation by anybody else. That's why I'm curious.
Yeah, we've seen it out here, and just for grins, we can do it here.
I didn't mean you to have to do that.
Oh no, that's okay because it's one of these things. One time only, it'll refresh this stuff, and I'll be in business. And I don't mind. We can just test it out here.
Because I saw where your odd data went in there. Oops,
yeah. Well, so again, what that did is there's a cookie or something that says I've signed in, and so it forgot that.
All right, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Yep. And so.
You understand this, Susan?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had to do that. We have the ML Exchange. We had to always go in and clear our everything out because it did the same thing. I would get errors running reports and everything.
Right.
So I was kind of in the habit of doing that with Internet Explorer, but it looks like it's the same thing with Chrome now, too.
Yep. So let's see how much it remembered. Okay. So it remembered.
Got to know tech support pretty well, too.
Okay. Yeah, see there, Lee, it just did the same thing.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Didn't help.
convince myself.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right, because if it really did, then I'd want to know that. So anyway, on this one, we'll just fix it with the reload or refresh this page, and
Yeah, they said it's kind
How
of
annoying
common.
is that?
yeah,
Well, it's with databases, working with databases, because it captures so many screenshots, and sometimes it just tries to be lazy and doesn't go back to where you want it to go back. I used to have a same thing with a home sale report. I had to, in order, they couldn't fix it because it kept wanting to go back to the one I had before, but I wanted to put in, I would do a home sale report for 4 quarters. I'd type in, January 1st to the March 31st. And then I would like to go back and then type in a new date. Well, I had to go back and do all the same parameters. It took me forever. I had to go fill out every single and what MLS and what, and when it would just be easier to hit the back button and fill in a new date and then make a new report. But because the cache, it would just mess it up. I had to go through. It took me twice as long to do it.
yeah, yep.
And
So, we're bumping into some of the limits of technology or the capabilities of programmers on this stuff, and so I guess those kind of little, things you got to keep in your back pocket. What I'm doing now, and I'm just doing it quickly here to show you, but I would be looking at these the MLS listings and fine tuning this because really that's going to be the key for predicting the good values for all 1,000 properties in this zone, is making sure I've got the comps well adjusted. So the one that's selling for 473, if the condition really should be a 9, then I want to get that there. And you'll see.
So you'd have to go into the MLS detail sheet and look at that.
Yeah, I mean, I use a 2-monitor system.
You can't make that decision from this.
Right. That's right. I mean,
Okay.
Again, I think there was an enhancement about putting some more information here, or wouldn't it be sweet if you could just click on this and it'd be a link to your MLS and pop it up. For me, I just do a right-click copy and paste it into the MLS on my other screen. And then I just look at it, so it's like I've got the piece of paper in front of me. There's another fella here. He wanted to print them all out, so he's got a notebook, and he printed out all the sales for the last 6 months because he's more of a paper guy and prefers it that way. So however you do it, I think that's the analyzing these and looking at your adjustments and saying that wasn't a 5 like I assumed. Is the key to getting the tool to work right. And each time you make a change here, so again, this is kind of a test zone, but if I said, all right, the condition here really is an 8, once I put that in, it's going to, you may have seen this number just change. It's going to make some changes on what it predicts for this one and all the others. And the same way here, when I pick a new comp, if I click this, it's probably going to make those red numbers change a little bit, based on this one, because it's sold for $390 versus $430. And so when you're doing this, picking the comps, if you've got the luxury of a good number of them that you can go back over the last 6 months, you will want to do some bracketing. I mean, you'll want to try to find a really good a high price sale that's in real good condition, a lower price that's in worse condition. Same way with the size range if you can. So, the same kind of thing that you'd have in kind of the current underwriting requirements of bracketing things. But that's going to help the tool be more accurate in predicting all the prices. So this business of balancing, each month you'll go in and look and pick the new comps you want to use. And then over here, there's this Make Modified Live. I don't know why they still have the Make Live one, but we'll click this, and then it's good. Yeah.
I know you did not save changes when you did the change to 1927 Treewood Lane. I'm assuming that you have to do that every time you make a change to something, even though it has changed the screenshot. If you don't do that and you get out of it and get back in it, it's the same way it was, right?
Lee, to be safe, I would say yes, click it. There are some things that that puzzle me with the web page interface. not only that thing of populating the fields funny, but as you may have seen, if you go back and do a search, you want to search on a different zone and then search on yours to refresh things. So I'm
Yep.
I'm not positive, but I'm glad you called that out, because normally I would do that. Is click the save changes if it's down there. But I'm not positive that it didn't actually update it automatically and just didn't
Right,
change that
right.
thing. This box you can see here is this QA alerts, and you'll get a number of these typically, and it's kind of based on the old underwriting rules. It'll say, there's properties more than 1 mile away, or, over 6 months old. And it's certainly been discussed, and I think they're going to pull that out because, we're not, this tool, this Volytics thing, does its predicting and the statistics, so it makes adjustments for all those things, and probably doesn't need to be checked each time. But for now, it'll put these in, and you can review the results of the QA process and say, okay, it really is saying I've got too many properties where what was it? It exceeds the maximum size range or something. So maybe I need to go back in and find a comp that's really up there at the top of the range. It's closer to 1599, so it'll bracket it better. This particular market group has 1,000, so that took a little bit longer, but sometimes you've got to wait a little bit. But here you can see these things that you'll look at each time. Subject value is not bracketed by unadjusted comparable sales prices. Cannot be marked live. If I click on this link of 42 properties, it'll show me those and I can look at it. But you can see this blue eye. That means I've already considered that, and I override it. And so I click this override, and I can put in a comment here if I want and say okay. And I'll say those, so that what that says is those 42 properties, even though the price isn't bracketed, I'm saying that they still look right. And here's this maximum distance, and so I'll say, yeah, I know this market, and it's a long, narrow strip, just like you've got down there in Florida, Susan, and the properties in the middle of the island are more similar, and it doesn't matter if you go 2, 3, 4 miles away.
Right.
And so, again, I use that based on my knowledge here, and say, so I put in a comment before. If there's not a comment in, I can type it, and I'll say okay, and override that too, so I get this blue information thing. I click update live status, and now that tells Volytics, okay, everything's ready. It'll go in and do the new calculations and the new predictions for the prices there. And then if I go back here to this top tab that says markets and search here, here's the one we just did, and so it's saying 1,862 properties are live, modified live with comps as of March 16th, and so that's how it's going to look each month when you do the balancing. And so go ahead.
The balancing, it's not done on each property. The balancing is done when you bring the MLS in. Is that?
Well, each month you would import the MLS, and then you would do this thing that I just did where you'll search on the market and say, okay, I've got 34 markets, and now I'm going to click on each of these 34 links and look at the sales and do those adjustments. So the balancing for a zone might be balancing actually not 34, it may be 15 to 20 markets each month.
Balancing the market as opposed to each sale.
Yes, balancing the market group as what I should have said. So
balancing the market group. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and that'll become clear. I'll look at it another time too, and it'll help.
Yeah. So what I just did with those.
I think.
Go ahead, Lee.
Oh, go ahead, Lee.
Can I just put in here for a second? I think what you're looking at, at least this is the way I conceptualize this. The market group it's one. Think of it as one unit.
Okay.
So that's what now you've imported new sales from, I mean, right now we just did the one for 316. So your market group is it's like a homogenated property within that group, and that's what the sales are trying to balance too. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm not explaining it very well.
Yeah, like each market group being each range in that particular thing. So you just go in and you're kind of like refreshing them and looking them. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so
Well, what you're looking at is sales within that market group, because it won't pick sales that are not in that market group.
Okay.
So
is that right, Matt? I mean, it can't pick from another group.
Correct. So what we just did there with looking at those 3 new comps was for this market group with 1,862 properties, we adjusted the comparables, and now we have predicted values for 1,862 properties that are
and you would go
current as of March 16th.
You would go every month over all those ones to the left, all under market name, correct?
Yes.
You would balance each one of those separately.
Right. Now, the reason I said it's not 34, it's actually going to be only those that are residential and have hopefully at least 200. Here, this is 184. But this chunk that you can see right down there, that's the ones. This one that's 3750, these big homes, well, actually that's multifamily, so I wouldn't be doing that one anyway. I'm just doing residential ones. And up here, this hillside homes area, I haven't done the step that's called combining, because like I was saying earlier, you're going to need at least a couple hundred properties in a market group if you're going to be able to get enough sales. And so for a zone, you're going to want to get it down to as few market groups as makes sense. So have as many as possible combined where they could legitimately be comps. So like here in this hillside homes area, I might say I've only got 37 properties in the 2,500 to 3,000 square foot, and another 24 and 3,000 to 3,749. Those I can probably combine together and make one market group. And so that's what I'll do is I'll use this thing that's called the primary secondary relationship. So down here, let me pick a line like this one right here where you can see 41 and 41. That's how many are in the primary market group that's called 1,600 to 1,999 townhomes. But over here, this number is bigger, 82. Just coincidentally, that's doubled. But it says that there's another 41 that are underneath this as secondary market groups.
Okay.
And so those may be
cool.
condos that were 1,300 to 1,599, or townhomes. I'm saying those are similar enough that I want to combine those together. I was trying to get this number higher, and it may be for my market, there's just not enough townhomes where I'm going to be able to take it modified live because there's not enough sales for Validix to predict. And so there'll be some of that fallout. So it's kind of the 80-20 or the 90-10. Hopefully we can get 90% of the properties, but there's going to be outliers or unique ones where we just can't get enough grouped together.
Yeah, like geodesic domes on the barrier island kind of thing.
Yep. And this hillside thing, that's probably the classic case. There really aren't homogeneous areas up there, but I can try.
Would you end up classifying them as unique anyway?
Yeah, and I can use whatever code I want here to say, it's unique, and I'm not really going to work with it. I'm not going to look at these each month because there's not enough sales or there's too much variation for Validix to really do its magic and predict the prices.
That's what's going to happen in New England with antique homes. And when I say antique, I'm talking about almost anything built prior to 1900.
Yep.
The condition of that house and its location will depend directly on what the value is, and the range can be tear down value to as expensive as anything in the marketplace.
Yep. Yeah, and that reminds me of another point I was going to make earlier, Susan, and I think Lee certainly for your market. When you're looking at creating these markets, it may be that the GIS tool doesn't work or only gets you halfway there, because some areas, the geographic lines are going to work and it'll make sense to divide the zone into 3 geographic markets. But another one, you might have an overlay. So you might have a neighborhood, where there's some 200-year-old homes, and you're going to have all those together because they'll compete with each other. But across the street is some newer ones that are 20th century homes, and you're going to combine those into a different market group. So you don't want to think of that GIS tool as showing you all your properties or even being a necessary piece. You can use it and create. What the GIS tool does is it's a one-time deal to slap a market name onto all the properties that are in that area that it shades. But then after that, you could go in and tune it up or carve out little areas or do whatever you want to do. So it's not necessary, and it's a one-time deal you should do right at the start when you're setting up your market. And then after that, you don't want to use it anymore because you're going to be fine-tuning it, based on other factors if you need to.
That's what I see in mine. Basically, in that zone, my divisions are going to be on water. I'm going to have water, ocean view. I'm going to have river view, canal view, and then interior no view, and that's really where it is. But within each of those categories, you are going to have some fancy subdivisions, later built homes and, estate homes, executive homes, and then you're going to have the 50s and 60s, kind of in each one of those categories. So it's going to break down, by different things. Here's one thing I had that is a question. We have a lot of pool homes down here, and I would rather not make a separate market for pool homes because then you start getting nitty-gritty, but it is kind of a factor that we we'll try to choose match one pool home against another one since there's so many. But is there a way to search on that without having to create a separate market group, or would you do that primary, secondary, and maybe include pool homes and because it's nicer if one has a pool, it's really nicer to compare it to another one that has a pool. How would you handle a factor like that?
What you said about the primary, secondary is exactly how I do it. I wish I knew a little bit more what's going on under the hood with Volytics, but I do know, or at least it's been stated, that the first priority is given to other properties that are in the primary market group or the same market group, and then after that, Volytics will search or give lower weight to properties that are in any of the other ones that are combined with the primary, secondary. So then, if you create the pool homes and non-pool homes and combine them, it's going to look first for other sales that are pool homes. So, if you can carve it out that way, that would be the ideal way to do it.
Well, that would be important to me as opposed to, say, garage, because sometimes that's less. There's people down here that really want pool homes, and then there are people down here who really do not want pool homes.
Yeah.
So it kind of is an important factor.
Right. And so, we won't do much today, and I know in the other meetings you've seen some demonstrations of the Ready tool. But if your assessor, and I just pulled it up here for a zone, but if your assessor has that information somewhere, and I think there's a extras comment here. Let me see if that has some information in it. So like here in our county, the assessor does track whether it has a pool or spa, and it's got it here. So if you don't have any other way and your assessor has that information somewhere, and we can map it into Volytics, then...
You got a couple of different pool ones there, Matt.
Yeah, pool...
Slide that slide bar down. No, the slide bar down. There's a couple of different pool designations. That pool spa. Now you've got another one with pool spa. Keep going.
Yep.
I saw another pool. There it is.
Yep.
That's a none, though. Oh, you don't know what the number is because it's out of the screen.
Right. This kind of thing, extras, comments, and some of this other stuff, is where you've got to have an understanding of what your assessor reports and an understanding, or at least be able to figure out what Volytics is doing, because I can see, and I haven't looked this one up, but it concatenates, it puts together a number of things. There's something here that's a yes to, that might be garage spaces, and that's kind of here, and then there's none, which may be the pool spa. So here you've got, let's say 1-car garages without a pool, 1-car garage with a pool spa, 1 car with a spa, 2-car with a pool spa, blah, 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 and some of this other stuff here, central air. So, there's a number of kind of extra information items that the assessor has that FAIRS, I believe, or Volytics has put together. And so it's in here, but you may have to do a little bit of work to see what's in there and to figure out if it's useful to you. But if it is, then you can click all the ones that have pool in the name and go over here in this section and, change the market name from California 612 to California 612 pool. So that's the power of this thing.
Yeah, that's really good. I can do it there so that when it brings it in, or when it goes to, to get ready to, or when I bring it into, or bring it back to Volytics and it gets uploaded, then is that where I make the choice to combine those into primary and secondary?
Yeah, exactly. And so I'll just give you a quick demo of that as well. What I do, if I've got a bunch of them, I'm done with the Ready tool and pulled it back into Volytics, and I've got 180 markets and I want to combine them, I start looking down the list here and I say, well, I'm going to combine single families with single families. I won't do condos with single families. And I'm going to say kind of in this mid-range here, I may combine the 1,600 to 2,000 and, these 2,500 to 2,999. I'll pick the one, and just for me, that has the largest number right now, and then I'm going to put the other ones underneath it and make it secondary. So I'm going to say, okay, I kind of know what I'm going to do. It'll show me all my choices again, but I'm going to click on this market group, Hillside Homes, single family, 2,500 to 2,999. Now it brings me up to this screen, and up here, this combine button or link that's on the second bar, there's the blue bar and then the second bar. I'm going to click that. All right, then it brings me to this screen. So it's showing me here on the green bar the market I'm working with, the market group, and it's going to be my primary, Hillside Homes, 2,500 to 2,999, and it's got 37 properties in it. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take the Hillside Homes that are 2,000 to 2,499. Oops. That one's undefined, so I don't know what it is, but let's say this one. And I'm going to click this button here, and I'm going to put it over here. So now it's made this one a secondary market group. So it won't display on that first page anymore. In addition to my 37 in the primary, I combine those other 24 in this one, and I get a total of 61. And maybe I'm going to do...
How many...
Go ahead.
How many can you combine? Because I noticed that when we do properties around here, once you get past 3,000, 3,500, you sometimes you will go all the way up to 6,000 in a group on a search when we do it on our MLS, just because there's so few homes. It's the same thing. Are you allowed? How many groups of those can you combine, or is it just primary and secondary at this point?
You can combine as many as you want to be secondary market groups under a primary, but once a property is put in and tied to another property in this primary secondary relationship, then it won't be over here on the available market groups. So you kind of have to see what's happening. Once you take one primary and put one secondary to it, then neither one of those will ever show up on this available market group again. You can go in and break those relationships if you say, "Oops, I don't like it anymore. I'm going to take this out."
But you can re-separate it then,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Well, then that's not a problem.
Yeah, so you can kind of figure out, does it make sense for me or not? And that's the other thing I tell people, don't be too worried about making mistakes going into this. You'll be saving a copy of the XML file you first download, so if you totally mess it up, you can just reload the one that had no changes in it. So you can always kind of reset back to 0 if you realize you've had a catastrophic failure. And even little things like this, you can go in and change it. And on the Ready tool, if you say, I really didn't want to change all those to 7s, I wanted to change them to 8s. Well, if you've only got 7s on those ones that you want to be 8s, you can actually select those and make them an 8. So there's lots of power to filter and find the ones you want to change and make changes. So this is rough scoring, and it's the first pass, and you can tune it up in the second pass or change how you did things in the second pass. The only one I'm a little gun shy with is that GIS tool, because it's fast, but it's limited and a little flaky if you want to go in and change market groups after you've named it. So my advice on the GIS tool is use it once initially, kind of at the start of your work, and then don't mess with it anymore.
Okay, now the GIS tools, that's drawn in Explorer, right?
No. In fact,
drawn in here?
The GIS or the map tool is the big one that you only want to do here. And so let me just finish this up on this. Combining, there's no save button or anything. Once you've done it, it's done. So if I go back here, I'm on markets and I click search. I had, I think, 37 before. Oh, it's 34, and now it's 32.
Okay.
And so, let's see, here's the one I think we did here, this Hillside Homes. So you can see here it's got this total properties is 62, in that market it's 37. So our work's done there.
Right, but you could go back and separate it from this point.
Yeah, exactly. You could just click on this
okay, good. Yeah.
again and look at the combine, and there it is. And you can take those out. This map tool, it definitely has to be done with Chrome, not with Internet Explorer. And so here's my 3-4 zones, and when I click on one of these, it'll show me what I've done here. And then I can take this one, Hillside Homes, and delete it if I want, and then go in and draw again. And it's probably similar to what you'd use on your MLS, where you just click points. Oops. Okay, and then this little plus drops down here, and I can name it. Now, just a comment, I know we were talking about this last night, Lee. The way this thing works, I don't have to trace the edges of my black line here, because it's only going to rename stuff that's in my zone. So any properties that are out here on Felter Road aren't going to get renamed. It's only going to name stuff that doesn't already have a name in it. So any of my Piedmont Hills High School properties are not going to get renamed. Only the stuff that does not have a name in it already will get this market name that I create. Like that.
Interesting. In my area, I don't know how I can use this effectively, except perhaps for condominiums.
Yeah.
And I'm not certain I would even want to, because I've already got other discriminators using the Ready tool for condominiums.
Right. So there's certainly zones that I think you won't need to use this at all. In this particular market, there's enough of a difference between these two high school districts that it affects prices, and so I went ahead and cut those out. And I said Hillside Homes are a category unto themselves, and so I'm going to use that. But within this one, I'll carve out the condos, and so I'll have pockets of them that will be, Hillside, or maybe I call it Piedmont, Montclair, because that's the condo development, and I want to keep that one separate from this other one down here because it's got a pool and better amenities, and call that Piedmont Royale.
But you wouldn't use the GIS tool.
I would not. I'd use the Ready tool.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
That's kind of where we are, at least here in New England. I'm going to speak specifically about the area in which I know, and that's the area in which I appraise. We have everything in every town, but we are town specific. So properties that are built at the same time, age, when I say built at the same time, the same age, the same size, the same square footage of land area. If you put that property in New Britain, it sells for one price. If you put that same property in Avon, it sells for another price, a significantly different price.
So that might be a case for using the GIS tool just to draw New Britain and Avon, and then go in after that and do all the further or the subdividing for historic homes or something.
That would be a fantastic idea
if
the zones were town geography specific. They aren't. They splash all over the place. They were drawn so badly with the zip code combinations that it's nearly impossible to do that. It just won't work.
Yeah. Okay. So again, it's going to be
they splash all over.
Yeah. You mean
they followed the road.
You mean a town might be cut into two zones or something, two different zones?
Yes.
Or seven.
Yeah.
Or the zone itself may splash over several towns.
Yeah.
They did that with the city of Hartford. The city of Hartford has several different little post offices kind of located on the outskirts, and so they had several different zip codes, and it turned out when they did the zone drawing that those particular zip codes were delivered by other postal offices in other parts of different towns, just because it was easier to get physically from that post office to the houses in those that served that area. It was strictly a matter of streets and the way the streets are built. So, okay, fine. You'll take a look at the zone, and you've got some properties in South Hartford, some properties in Wethersfield, some properties in Newington. Those are all contiguous towns, but the same size, age, and square footage of lot in those towns convey for significantly different prices, and yet they're all in the same zone, and Analytics tries to make them work all the same way.
Yeah.
So, it's a challenge.
Yep. So that's, absent redrawing the zones, which they did up in San Francisco, like you're saying, you'll have to use the ready tool to hopefully find some other, criteria that you can use and cut those all out.
Yep.
Are we looking at one? You've got 4 sections of one zone. Is that what we're seeing here?
Yeah. So the black is the boundary for the zone itself, and then these are the markets I cut it into.
Okay, so it's basically 4 markets, and then the program itself divides those into submarkets unless you go in there and create further markets.
Yeah, so the Analytics program will start with these market names, and then for each market name, it will do the slicing and dicing by size range, by style, and type. After
the data's in there and everything.
Yep.
And that's when you have to go in and combine them.
Okay.
Yep.
Good.
It
And
takes them apart for you, so you have to put them back together again the way you think it should be, not the way the machine thinks it should be.
The way it goes there. Now, is it a zone? What is typical what is too many for a typical zone? I mean, I just want to 4 to 10. Does that seem to be, or is 10 too many for a typical zone?
I'd say 10 is too many unless you have a scheme in mind, like your pool homes, to just do the 10 initially and then go in and combine them to a primary, secondary. So what the end result is, you'll want to have at least 200 properties in every market group, and maybe you get the 200 by doing the primary, secondary combining. And you'll want to have the minimum number of market groups that are reasonable for that zone. So if it's a nice homogeneous zone, which I've got, one, they just went in after World War II and, built homes across the whole thing, and so they're all pretty similar. And then, Analytics sliced it into 30 market groups, and I combined it down to 17. So
Okay.
Maybe the reality might be a minimum of 15, and I would say a maximum of 30 or so that are your active ones. You'll have the few outliers, the unique properties, commercial ones, the hillside ones that you just won't be able to score. But in terms of what you'll go in and work on each month, I would say you'd want it in the high teens if you could.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. On it, just slightly off topic, but just before I forget the question, about how long does it take once you got the Dropbox? How long does it take, and you've given them your request license, about how long does it take to get the license thing back?
It shouldn't be more than a couple days. I thought Glenn actually had the tool that would generate the key. And so if it's been more than 2 days, I would send Glenn a reminder. He may have just forgot. I think he's getting a little bit overwhelmed.
I send him a reminder in about 10 minutes. I get mine back instantly.
Okay, because I keep checking this and I don't see the thing there. So, okay. I hope I'm doing it right.
Whoa. Where are you checking, Susan? He sends you an email, and it's enclosed in the email as an attachment.
Oh, he does? I thought I kept checking the Dropbox, the original Dropbox.
No. You'll see other people bounce in and out of there, but I've never seen mine come there. Mine always comes as an attachment to an email.
Well, let me check here. I'm not, because they did send me an email saying, what was the last one?
It's really simple. It just says, here you go, and then there's an attachment.
No, it says, I just sent you an invite to Dropbox.
Okay, that's for the Ready tool itself.
No. Okay, right, and then, but I don't see it.
And then you open it. You open the Ready tool, and then it says get. Yeah.
Downloaded it.
When you open. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Tell me what you did. Tell me what you did. Tell me what you did.
Okay, I made a folder on my desk, Ready Tool folder, and I downloaded Dropbox, each one of the 8 files, I believe it was, and then I took the one that says Get License and I put it back in the Dropbox, and I've been waiting.
Oh yeah, I think you'll want to email that to Glenn if you were able to attach a file to your email.
Yeah, I could do that. Oh, I'm sorry, because it's because the instructions they gave me says to send it back in the Dropbox.
Oh well, maybe he changed
things. It would be updated.
No, I don't think that's right, because I did that too, and he never did see it. You need to email him the Get License.
Gotcha,
that was his instructions to me. Were copy the Get License thing, and drop it in as an attachment to the email, and then he sends you back the license, and then you have to copy it from the email and drop it back in that folder on your desktop.
Wow. Oh, thank you. Because it says here, once the files have been pasted in there, it says do the file name ready.exe. It says this will generate a Get License file. Copy this file and paste it into your Dropbox file. We will then generate a license file and copy it into your Dropbox. So I kept checking.
Those were the pre-printed words that came along with the Ready tool itself when Robert Katz originally designed it, and that's not how it works.
Okay. I'm glad
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
I've been sitting here waiting for it, thinking, I'd like to get started, Okay, yeah, I'll do that then. Okay. I'll do that. Thank you very much, guys. I'm glad I asked
that.
Is that the way you did it too, Matt?
Yeah, I emailed it to him.
Yeah, because the new iterations, I'm testing the new Ready tool for the tech committee, and there's been like 6 iterations since we started this, and each time you have to send it to them and send it back, and it's a whole little process.
Yeah, and
All right.
I meant to say something, but I wonder if we still need this whole license key scheme, if we own it now, but
it does seem kind of redundant.
Yeah.
But,
Yep.
Maybe this is one of those things where, gosh, we've always done it that way.
Yep. So, all righty. Well, guys, I've got another appointment here before lunch, and so I'll need to wrap up today. But hopefully, it's been helpful, and we'll continue.
Oh, this has been fantastic,
next week.
Matt. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, absolutely helpful.
Yeah. And anything else? I mean, just in terms of being stuck on anything, I could certainly handle another quick question or two, but.
Nope.
I'm
another
good
5
to
minutes.
go.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah, I've got to go anyway, so I'll let you go, Matt, and if I do have anything, I'll email you.
yeah. Please feel free to. And Susan, I'll send you those documents as well. We didn't really jump into them, but it might be helpful just to kind of step you through once you've got the ready tool and are working on things.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate that. It's really been great.
You bet. Okay. We'll talk to you guys later then. Thanks.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.